Turn with me to Daniel chapter 3. We're reading starting in verse 12. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego pay no attention to you. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you set up. And furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I set up? When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to save you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, Well, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, and the God we serve is able to save us from it, he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you set up. Nebuchadnezzar was furious with them, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. And so these men, wearing the robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. And the king's command was so urgent that the furnace was so hot that the flames of fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, Were there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire? And they replied, Certainly, O king. And he said, Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. And Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, royal advisors crowded around them. And they saw the fire not harm their bodies, nor was a hair on their head singed. The robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. And Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. Lord, we thank you for the day, and thank you for this opportunity to study your word. Guide us in all truth and help us to apply it in each and every one of our own lives. In your son's name. Continuing our study of Daniel with the tip to try to get lessons for us that apply to us from Daniel. When we look at Daniel, we see that it was written to provide hope to both Israel physically at that time, who was living in a land of captivity, Babylon, as well as to spiritual Israel today, which is God's people, who live in captivity in the figurative land of Babylon today, the world. And as we look at these lessons, what has happened there physically, we can apply them into our spiritual lives today as we deal with these same situations in our own living in the world. Things we're looking at is shows how God uses the powers of this world in order to accomplish his will. He shows, Daniel here shows that the battle is really not a physical battle, as most people see what's going on, but it's really a spiritual battle, what's happening in another world. He shows us how God is going to judge the nations of this world. And in judging those nations, he's going to bring about the end to them as his kingdom will rise, and his kingdom, which is ruled from the New Jerusalem, where God resides on the throne, will be victorious over Babylon, or the world. Both then in the physical sense and today in the spiritual sense. Last week we took a look at Babylon, or the world's arrogant view toward God's people, then physically and us today. How the world only sees what they want to see, and it's always about them. We looked at how basically God hides the truth from them because the world has no desire to know the truth. They only see the part that they want to. we look through some applications on that. The world thinks their power to rule comes from their own abilities, or who they are, or the military power, or whatever. In this country and other countries in the world, and whether it be a warlord, a king, a president, a dictator, it doesn't matter. Those powers think that their power comes from their own strength. Might makes right. But the reality is far different from that. They think that God, Jehovah God, is a revealer God. We talked about that. He's one that has these real nice philosophies, these nice ideas, and he knows these things, but he really doesn't have any power. We saw how that's exactly how Nebuchadnezzar viewed the God of Daniel last week. And we see how in this world today, even people who claim to be Christian think of it as a great philosophy, but they really don't believe in the power of God. And he said that there's a heaven and a hell, and everybody's going to have an accounting. They don't believe that. You know, one of the most common expressions, even in Christendom, is how can a loving God send somebody to hell? Well, honestly, we've said that before. He doesn't. We make the choice. He says, you come with me, or go live somewhere else. And they choose to do their own. So he doesn't send anybody there, but it is a reality. And but the world does not see that because they see God as having no power. They're just good ideas, good philosophies. Practice some of those things that Jesus taught. Sermon on the Mount, great way to live your life. You'll have a good, happy life. Also, the world thinks you should follow their view, however they think, and whatever their views on things are. And if you don't, they get upset. If they get upset, they figure out a way to come back at you. That's where it brings us up today. And the situation as they led up to today and the arrest of these three men. So, what is taking place here is, even before the first part of this chapter, if you'll remember, that in chapter 2, I guess it was 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and Daniel was able to interpret it. Because of that, the king was very pleased with him, and we see that he placed Daniel in a very high position. Not just in a high position, but he placed him over somebody. Who was that? All the wise guys. Including the astrologers. All of them.
I did charlatans.
Do what? Charlatans. Okay, charlatans. Yeah, there you go. Put him over all those guys. So he puts him over all these people, or the rule, plus he's over the province of Babylon. So he gives him in this high position, and in that position, the first thing Daniel says, well, I got three buddies here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Did you hear those names about 10 times today? I said it as many times. And he asked that they be put in a high position as well, since they were his buddies. That's what the king does. He does. How did that make the charlatans or this group of people feel? Not happy. Not happy. They just got promoted around them, and they weren't even one of the smart ones as far as they were considered or whatever. So now Daniel's over them. These guys are given more power than him and promoted. And so they're not happy. So the first thing they do is when they see this, and the king puts forth, that builds a statue to himself and his God, and puts a statue and makes his command, they see that these three guys did not obey, did they? So because of that, it's, they refuse to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, they say, aha, gotcha. Now is their chance. Now they have a chance to bring down the Jews. And it's interesting because they don't say that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego aren't doing this. They're the examples. They say the Jews. So they want to make an attack on the Jews, the Jewish people as a whole here. God's people as a whole. Okay? And it goes to the king and he says, like we talked about last week, these Jews, hey, they don't pay any attention to you. Wow. Good way to get some king mad. Tell him that somebody doesn't listen to him. That's the first thing they did. They poked him. Then the next thing, he said, these Jews do not serve your gods or worship your image, which is all about you, remember? So they don't have any respect for you, and so they think they got these guys where they want them. By the appearances of the world, do they? Absolutely. From a world point of view, they absolutely do. Now, what I always wondered about is, this is the book of Daniel. It's written by Daniel. It's about Daniel. Now he's talking about three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who refused to bow down to the statue. Where's Daniel? He's here. He's ruling these people, these same folks. Why is Daniel not in this thing? I don't know. The Bible doesn't say. All I can think of is, well, if you're going to accuse somebody, do you accuse the king of not following his own laws? No. What about your boss? How about if you just get one of his buddies, take him down, and in the process drag the whole mess down? That's a possibility. Or the fact is, since he was over the province, maybe he wasn't in town. You know, and the province, and we talked about meaning over the province as in ruling from a economic and educational and administrative thing, not as in rule with an iron fist kind of thing, power. So, I don't know. I've always thought that was an interesting question, that he was not in the middle of this. But,
Hey, Scott.
yeah.
I had thought the same thing.
Okay.
And I was kind of back, if someone could interpret my dream and forecast it, and it be true, I don't believe I would miss a thing with it.
There you go. There's another reason. But, did they like Daniel? I don't think so. They took an attack on the Jews, and they picked these three out as the ones to make the example of. I think they were trying to bring Daniel and company down, but they were afraid to take on the man that the king had already said was pretty smart. And as you pointed out, they knew he was, because he could already read your mind. Okay, good point. All right, anyway, that's just an aside. All right, so how did this make Nebuchadnezzar feel? Happy? I mean, this isn't just a king. This is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar ruled what? A world. This was the empire. He's the one that had fed, when he got fed up with the Jews, he'd gone to them 3 times and tried to control them, and then finally said, all right, I'll just obliterate you. And he literally did, for all practical purposes. Destroyed the place. He didn't believe in being messed with. So the Bible says he was furious with rage and called these 3 men in. Called them in. And the first thing he says, okay, is it true? Is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image? So he asked them that. I noticed that they never give an answer. Either because they didn't, or he never gave them a chance. I don't know. I think a little bit later on we got the idea that they didn't want to. They just didn't respond. Maybe like Jesus when he was challenged before Pilate. Just didn't respond to it. Because later they're going to say, I don't have to give you an answer. We don't need to defend ourselves before you. So maybe they just kept their mouth shut. So he says, I'm going to give you a chance to do it. Now, when this music plays and everything happens, I'm going to give you a chance to go ahead and do it. And by the way, if you don't, there ain't a God out there, not one God out there that's going to be able to rescue you from whose hand? His hand. No God out there will rescue you from him. Remember last week when we talked about that? I told you he didn't respect God's power. That's why I felt like he considered him as a revealer God, because everything was about revelations and all that. He never respected his strength, his power. It's all powerful. And here he is saying, look at me. There is a God out there that's going to be able to save you. So we find that they refuse. So what does he do? As a matter of fact, they refused to do it. I skipped right over that from my notes even. Okay. They said, oh, we don't need to defend ourselves in this matter. You see, our God is able to save us. rescue us if he wants to. And if he doesn't, that's okay too. But I thought it was interesting when they said, we don't even have to defend ourselves before you, because they answer to who? Living God. We're talking about physical Babylon, physical king. Who's in charge? They did not answer to Babylon, the king of Babylon. They answered to the king of Jerusalem. Even though they were in captivity, whenever something crossed with whatever, their king in Jerusalem, God, said they stuck with it. Didn't matter what they were doing, what situation they were in another kingdom that they would live in. Okay? Says, we don't even have to defend ourselves because we answer to only our king, not you. Alright? It says, in our God, he's able to save us. And if he doesn't, that's okay. That's his choice. Why? Who has the authority over life and death? The king. The king. Nebuchadnezzar has life of control over life and death in his kingdom, right? Who has control if you're not part of Babylon, but you're part of Jerusalem? What king that has control over your life and death? God. So they answered to their God, and he had the power over their life and death, not Nebuchadnezzar. That's the way they viewed it. Okay? Because that is the king's decision. All right. So now we saw that it made him mad, and so he heated the fire. How many times? 7? Is that literal or figurative? Yes. I mean, you know, they talk about this furnace. It was fed, and anybody that's ever done any pounding, what's it called? Blacksmithing? You know, they do that. How do they get the fire hotter? Pump air into it. Well, that's exactly what they did then. They did build bellows or whatever, they pumped air into it. So all you had to do is, instead of having 1, put 7. Instead of 2, put 14 or whatever. It could be 7 times hotter. So they could have literally done it. On the other hand, 7 represents all you can do. You know, all you can do. So they made it very, 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 very hot. As a matter of fact, the point they made, it was so hot that when he called his strongest men in the army to tie these guys up and to take them and throw them in, what happened to these guys? Died. Burned them up. Burned them up. Killed the guys that were given the job. What a waste of your best men. Yeah. But he wasn't thinking. He was just mad. All right. So after he does this, we find that Nebuchadnezzar is the one that's still looking in the fire. Not the other people around him. They thought it's all over, but Nebuchadnezzar is still looking in the fire. And when he does, what does he see? 4 people walking around unharmed and untied. They burned the ropes off, or they just came off, or disappeared, or whatever. And these 4 men were walking around and talking like they were sitting right out here on the beach somewhere. 4 of them, excuse me. I thought I threw 3 in. Where'd the 4th one come? And then he makes a comment about the 4th one. He says he looks like what? Son of the gods, plural. It's one of those gods out there. He looked like a son of it. You know what I mean? He was something special about him. He was an angel. It was, we don't know. You know who he was, to be honest with you. Some theorize it was Jesus. I don't know. But it looked like the son of the gods. He recognized there was something special about it. And so he calls out and he has them, tells them to come out. He calls them the servants of the which God now? The Most High. He was a revealer God before, but now he's got the picture, doesn't he? The most powerful God, the Son, God of Most High. He has got a totally different picture of this God that Daniel serves.
Don't you wonder when he goes to the mouth of the furnace and he calls for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, why he doesn't say, and whoever that is.
Yeah. Any ideas why not?
I'm not want to say
Exactly. That would be my perspective. Like, if these three guys in here and a son of the gods is in there with him, I don't think I want to find out what he has to say. Yeah, that's a good question. Good point. There's a lot of things when you really think it through, you go, wow, I never really thought about that, but what about it? Okay, good point. Why would he do that? So they come out, and they're unharmed, unsinged, their clothes not burned. Not only that, but the clothes don't even smell of smoke. You ever been around something that's been burned? Ever been around a campfire? You come away, you come home, and your whole house says, whoa, where have you been? I remember a few years back, we were, I think like Christmas Eve or something, or some day, maybe it's Thanksgiving, I don't know, some day, we were at a house here in Kimball or whatever, actually before we built our house, a long time ago, and I like to boil peanuts. You ever boiled peanuts before? It takes forever. You pour water in, and boil it, and the water evaporates, and you produce more. Well, you know what happens when you take this big pot of peanuts and fill it full of water, and you've been boiling all day, and then you decide to go to Jasper to visit somebody. You better turn off the stove. Well, I have a habit of not doing that. And this was the first or second time, I don't remember which. But anyway, when we remembered it, hours later, we came back, and when we opened the door, the smoke was pouring out. The insurance company had to come in there and literally take everything and clean every single material in there. Carpets, clothes, drapes, and if it had a surface, they had to literally spray it and wipe it down because the film smoke is there. You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of the smell. And no matter what they did, there was still that tinge in it. These guys had been in the furnace and not a whiff of smoke smell on it. Forget the fact that it should have been disintegrated. They didn't even smell like it. All right, so we see how significant God was there. And he comes, brings them out. They come out unharmed, unsinged, no smell. And he looks at them and says, they were willing to trust Yahweh, their God. They were willing to defy the king. And they were willing to die first than betray their God or king. And because of that, he put out a decree. He put out a decree. And in that decree, he said that no one is going to speak ill of this God ever again. He recognized how powerful that this God was. And he said that nobody is going to speak bad of the God of these guys, or Judah, or whatever, ever again. And so he put this decree, and he put the penalty on it, and basically he promised them the same thing he was going to do to those charlatans, those astrologers, and all those folks back when Daniel saved them the first time. Chop them up into bits, and burn and destroy their homes. So he says, anybody speaks ill of this God, this is what's going to happen to them. He recognized then that Yahweh was more than someone that was smart and knew the future. He was someone that had the power over life and death, and it didn't matter what physical king said or did, his God had the power over that. All right? So then we see that he goes ahead and, contrary to what these astrologers wanted, he promoted these three guys again. So instead of bringing them down, he ends up promoting them even more. All right. That's the third chapter of Daniel. That's the situation with the statue that he makes to himself, to his God, and how God's people respond to it while they're in captivity. When we look at those lessons from Daniel, that's the physical situation where the people from Jerusalem were living in captivity in the place of Babylon, where they have a choice between serving their king, God, or serving Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon's king. Today, In the spiritual world, we see the same situation. The world, which is represented multiple times as Babylon, is trying to tell us a certain way to live and trying to rule over us. That's the world we live in. But our King rules from the New Jerusalem on the throne, is described, and from there he tells us how to live and what to do, which will provide us life and death as he views it. And as we look at those lessons and whatever, we start looking at this here today, there's some things that I want us to get out of it. First thing is this: the arrogance of Babylon, or the arrogance of this world. First of all, they think that everyone should believe as they do. In our world today, do you not see that the world around us believes that we need to believe the way they do? You know, we talk about the elitist. They have this view, and they're more educated, they're more knowledgeable, and they use all the wisdom of man and all the learning and all this. And because of that, we need to behave and do things a certain way and view people and view actions of people in a certain way. And they expect us to believe it the same way, don't they? And if we don't, what are you? Ignorant and unlearned. It's the same thing these guys were thinking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're not very smart. If you're smart, you wouldn't be defying the king and put yourself in jeopardy. We're in the same position today. Everyone, the world thinks everyone needs to believe the same way they do. As a matter of fact, they're very much in tolerance, don't they? We need to be tolerant of people that do this, and tolerant of people that act this way, and tolerant of people that act that way. Except when it comes to one thing: how we believe.
Your tolerance with us.
That's right. That's right. When we believe differently, they are very intolerant. As a matter of fact, they go to war in any way they can to try to tear you down and to tear up with the teachings and the things you said. Look how quickly our country and the people with these ideas try to tear down those ideas of Christianity, of Christ, and try to make it fluff it up the way they want it to be done. And the way they think God ought to view it. Even though that's contrary to what God says. Okay? So they'll go on the attack in order to do that. And their tolerance ends when you don't see it their way. You're expected to be tolerant, but they're not. They also think you should act exactly the way they think you should. You should do the same things, the way they believe it is, the same actions, and be able to be a participant in it. That's the way the world looks at it. They believe that that's what it should be. Okay? On the contrary, God's people, those who are from Jerusalem, those who follow after the king's rules there, just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, do we need to justify our beliefs? No. Justify. We do not have to justify anything. God said it, that's the way it is. Do we need to explain it, to teach them and learn? Sure. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about a justification for why we act in the way our King tells us to do. And so when people come on the attack to us, we don't have to sit here and justify and say, well, yeah, but God said it, that's the way it is, that's the way our King rules. You want to follow after the king of Babylon? Go ahead. Does that mean we explain? Sure, we need to explain because we like for them to be, follow after our king, right? But that's not the same thing. And just like Shadrach and Meshach, he said, we don't owe you an explanation. We don't owe you a justification. And so they didn't respond in that particular way. They just need to refuse to go along to get along. That's what they really would rather, the world would rather we did, right? Just kind of ride, don't rock the boat, go along, get along, and everything be okay, right? Keep all that little views of your own in your own head, and don't let anybody, don't rock anything. That's the way they want. If you do that, care what's done. If you speak up, you got a problem. That's where they come after you. All right? We must be willing, God's people must be willing to trust God and defy the world. You know, it's getting harder and harder in this country. It used not to be so because the views of God were a lot closer to the views of this country. But as they start getting farther and farther apart, it gets harder to do. But we're in a small part, in an easy part of the world. What happens if you go to the Middle East? What do they do to people who believe in God and Christ there? It's a lot more life and death there. You know? What's going on over there? But we must be willing to trust God and stand up against the world, our battle. All right? When faced by persecution by the world or Babylon, we need to think how. How should we think? Eternally. Like God. Like God from His throne in Jerusalem would think. Our attitudes, our views should be coming from a different place. That's why these astrologers and these three guys, even though they were on the king's staff, had totally different views on how to deal with this. Because they came from a different viewpoint. And as God's people today, we too, when faced with the world, we need to be able to come from an attitude of God's. Their attitude was God is able. Well, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't change. Our God is able to defeat them if He wants to. One of the verses I had written down from a previous time is in Psalm 66. In Psalm 66, it reflects back on what God has done for these people, Israel. Okay? And he says in verse 6, talking about the Israelites, how He saved them by turning the sea into dry land as they passed through the waters on foot. Remember when He crossed the Red Sea? Verse 9, how He preserved them, how He preserved our lives and kept us from slipping when they were walking. You refined us like silver. Verse 12, You brought us into a place of abundance. He provided. Look at the power of God and what He's able to do. He is able to defeat anybody in any way that if He wants to. So the power is there. The question is what God's going to do with it. Sometimes we ask Him to do certain things. Does He do that? Sometimes. Sometimes not. Why? Whose choice is it? The king's. It's always the king's choice. When a person comes before the king and lays a request before him, does he always give it to him? No. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. Because the king not only has had the power to make that decision, he also has the wisdom, we're supposed to have the wisdom, to make the right choice. Now what Solomon and David were all about? You look at examples of a good king trying to make the right choice. It's the same way with us when we come to God. It is okay if He doesn't do this, what we ask, save us from a certain incident or keep us from going through a certain thing. It's okay. Why? Sometimes He's just got a different plan. Sometimes He's got a different plan. I think of, Mark 14, what's that? Anyway, one that comes to mind we talked about last week, I think, was Jesus Himself. You know? Oh, that's what Mark 14 is. I'm sorry. This is Mark 14, verse 36. Jesus is talking to God saying, please, please, let this pass from me. You know what we say? Yeah, I don't want this terrible thing happening to me. But, whatever you decide. So even Jesus wanted to get out of going to the cross. But God, because He had a different plan, went through with it. Even with His own Son. Why would it be any different for me? So it's okay if He doesn't save me from this persecution because He has a different plan sometimes. And we should have the same attitude as Jesus, who is our King. It's like in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 21 through 23, when he tells us that our example should be the same as Christ, who suffered for us. When they hurled their insults at him, he didn't retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. That's our attitude. That's what we should do. We should have the attitude of the one that is actually ruling us. All right? Another thing that we can see from this lesson today when we're dealing with the Babylon that we live in is that God is always with us when we're in the fire. Just because we go through trials, just because we have persecutions, just because we have problems, God is always there with us. He's always that fourth person. He's always there with us. He tells us in Deuteronomy 31, verse 6, that he will never, ever leave his people. As long as they're looking to him, he'll never leave them. He'll never give us more than we can bear, Paul tells us in Corinthians. Never give us more than we can take. He's always there. As a matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus says, what is he going to do for us? Bring me your burdens. Bring them to me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Bring them to me. I'll take them. I'll carry them. I will carry them. Work for it. Matter of fact, one of the most inspirational type poems or whatever that you remember is the one called Footprints. You've all heard that. It kind of talks about walking in the sand and trials and all that. At the end of it, the person is saying, when things got the toughest, where did you go? There was only one set of footsteps left. That's when Jesus says, yeah, those are mine. I carried you. That's exactly what he says he will do. The illustration is exactly.
Don't you think sometimes we're supposed to suffer? It builds us up.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Revelation tells you that. Paul tells us that. Over and over everywhere it tells you that all that builds up endurance, builds up commitment, builds up strength, builds up all those things. Yeah, I mean, and I think every one of us as a Christian are going to go through it. Number one, because who's after us? Satan. Is he going to let you just slide on easy street? No. So I think we go through a series of events in our lives where he tries to figure out what button he can push each and every one of us, whether it be our wealth or health, family, a friend, whatever it may be. Trying to push a button to tear us down as we go through it. If you go all the way through that fire and come out, how do you know when to come out? Most people do. All right? So he's with you in the fire. One of my favorites is 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 17. Elisha talking to his servant. They're surrounded by these great armies. And it's just the two of them, and the servant is going, oh no, what do we do? And what does Elisha say? He says, remove the scales from the eyes of the servant so that he could see what he's really dealing with. And what he sees is the armies of God have surrounded the armies of the world. And in a few short hours, God destroys them out of chaos that they didn't even know they were being attacked. Why? Because the host and the armies of God are way more powerful than anything in this world. And they're there. God uses them on our behalf. And then lastly, in the end, after it's all said and done, Jerusalem, God in Jerusalem will be exalted. Every knee, Philippians 2:10, every knee will bow and worship Christ. There will come a time at the end, just like at the end of this event that they went through in their life, and the king basically says everyone's going to recognize the power of this God. There'll come at a time, everyone's going to recognize the power of Christ, our King. There will be a time, Revelation chapter 11, well, every man will glorify God. It'll be too late. They'll be living in a dungeon for eternity. But they will glorify him and recognize him as the power. So we look at these lessons, this thing, what Daniel was trying to teach us here, whatever, about the actual events that took place and how that transpires into our dealing with living in Babylon today. This is how it applies. Anything else? All right, next week we're going to take a look at chapter 5. I don't know whether it's chapter 4, read chapter 4 anyway, because we may touch on it. But chapter 5, which is dealing with Belshazzar, having a feast. Some things that go on there.